This is an extraordinary gathering, and it's a wonderful day. I started the day in Albuquerque meeting with tribal leaders from the Indian nations from all across the country had flown in to talk about the importance of once again placing the priorities of Indian country back on the agenda in the White House. Everybody that I've met, as we traveled on our way up here, we stopped to get some food and talk to some people, and everybody has been extraordinary. But obviously I want to begin by saying a few more words about the turmoil in our financial markets. We are in the midst of the most serious financial crisis in a generation, perhaps the worst since the Great Depression. 3 of America's 5 largest investment banks have failed or been sold off in distress. Our housing market is in shambles. Monday brought the worst losses on Wall Street since the day after September 11th. And the Fed has had to take unprecedented action to prevent the failure of one of the largest insurance companies in the world from causing an even larger crisis. Now, just this morning, we learned that the Fed had to act with central banks around the world to maintain the functioning of our financial system. So everywhere you look, the economic news is troubling. But here's the thing for so many of you here in northern New Mexico, and for so many Americans, this isn't really news at all, because you've been going through hardships for a lot longer than Wall Street has. You know, 600,000 workers have lost their jobs just since January. Home values are falling. Your paycheck doesn't go as far as it used to. It's never been harder to save or to retire, to buy gas or groceries. And if you put it on a credit card, they've probably raised your rates. In so many cities and towns across America, it feels as if the dream that so many generations have fought for is slowly slipping away. So I know these are difficult days, New Mexico. And I know there are a lot of families out there that are feeling anxiety right now about their jobs, about their homes, about their savings, about their retirement. But here's what I also know. This is not a time for fear. It's not a time for panic. This is a time for resolve, and it is a time for leadership. I know that we can steer ourselves out of this crisis. That's who we are. That's what we've always done as Americans. Our nation's faced difficult times before, and at each of those moments, we've risen to meet the challenge because we've never forgotten that fundamental truth, that here in America, our destiny is not written for us, it's written by us. That's who we are as Americans. But here's another thing that I know. We can't steer ourselves out of this crisis by heading in the same disastrous direction. We can't change direction with a new driver who wants to follow the same map. And that's what this election is all about. John McCain, my opponent, his first reaction to this crisis on Monday was to stand up and repeat the line that he said over and over again throughout this campaign. We counted it. He said it 16 times, and I quote, "The fundamentals of the economy are strong." Now, this comment was so out of touch that even George Bush's White House couldn't agree with it when they were asked about it. They had to distance themselves from John McCain. But the truth is, John McCain's attitude is nothing new. It reflects the same economic philosophy that he's held for 26 years, all the time that he's been in Washington. It's the same philosophy he shares with George Bush. It's the philosophy that says we should give more and more to those with the most and hope that prosperity trickles down like rain on top of us. It's the philosophy that says even common sense regulations are unnecessary and unwise. We can't mess with the marketplace. It's a philosophy that lets Washington lobbyists shred consumer protections and distort our economy so it works for the special interests instead of working people. That's the philosophy John McCain believes in. He's always believed in it. He's spent decades in Washington talking about it, supporting financial institutions who have promoted this philosophy instead of their customers. Phil Gramm, one of the leading architects of deregulation in Washington that led directly to this mess on Wall Street, also happens to be the architect of John McCain's economic plan. There was talk that John McCain wanted to put him in charge of the Treasury Department if John McCain was elected. Now, you may remember Phil Gramm. He's the guy who said that we're going through a mental recession. It's all in your head. And he's also the same man who called, who called the United States of America a nation of whiners. That's who John McCain listens to. He's consistently opposed the sorts of common sense regulations that might have set out some rules for the road for these financial institutions and lessened the current crisis. When I was warning about the danger ahead on Wall Street months ago because of the lack of oversight, Senator McCain was telling the Wall Street Journal, and I quote, "I am always for less regulation." This is what he said just a few months ago. Except now, with the magnitude of the crisis apparent, even to the Bush White House, John McCain wants to reverse himself. He wants to reverse course. Now, all of a sudden, he has become a populist. Now he's unleashed an angry tirade against all the insiders and lobbyists who happen to have supported him for the last 26 years. The same folks who are running his campaign right now. So on Monday, he said the economy was fundamentally sound, and he was fundamentally wrong. On Tuesday, he said the government should stand aside and allow one of the nation's largest insurers, AIG, to collapse. I mean, he said this in 3 different interviews, despite the possibility that it would put millions of Americans at risk. But by Wednesday, he said he had changed his mind. And today, he accused me of not supporting what the Treasury and the Federal Reserve Bank did with AIG, despite no evidence whatsoever that that's what I had said. He said he would take on the old boys network. But he seemed to forget that he took 7 of the biggest lobbyists in Washington and put that network in charge of his campaign. You know, when those 7 lobbyists are getting together, that's what's called a McCain staff meeting. John McCain can't decide whether he's Barry Goldwater or Dennis Kucinich. He's not clear about what he thinks or what he believes. Well, I have a message for Senator McCain. You cannot just run away from your long-held views or your lifelong record. You can't erase 26 years of support for the very policies and people who helped to bring in some of the problems that we're seeing. You can't just erase all that with 1 week worth of rants. What we need is honest talk and real solutions. Now, Senator McCain's first answer to this economic crisis was, get ready for this, a commission. That's Washington speak for, we'll get back to you later. Folks, we don't need a commission to spend a few years and a lot of taxpayer money to tell us what's going on in our economy. We don't need a commissioner to tell us gas prices are high or that you can't pay your bills. We don't need a commission to tell us that you're losing your jobs. We don't need a commission to study this crisis. You don't need somebody to write a report to tell you that unemployment is tough up here in northern New Mexico. or that unemployment is bad on Indian country. You don't need a report for that. What you need is a president who will solve it, and that's the kind of president I intend to be. Now, I think even McCain's people realized this commission thing was that dog wasn't going to hunt. So instead, today, he said that he's calling for the firing of the Securities and Exchange Commissioner. Well, I think that's all fine and good, but here's what I say. In the next 47 days, you can fire the whole trickle-down, on your own, look the other way crowd in Washington who has led us down this disastrous path. Don't just get rid of one guy. Get rid of this administration. Get rid of this philosophy. Get rid of the do-nothing approach to our economic problems and put somebody in there who's going to fight for you. Now let's be clear. Let's be clear. What we have seen in the last few days is nothing less than the final verdict on an economic philosophy that has completely failed. It is George Bush's philosophy. It is John McCain's philosophy. And I am running for President of the United States because the dreams of the American people can't be endangered anymore. It's time to put an end to a broken system and a failed philosophy that's breaking the American economy. It's time for change that makes a real difference in your lives. By the way, you notice that John McCain also has been stealing my lines. Have you noticed that? I've been talking about change for 2 years now. Talked about change when we were up, talked about change when we were down. John McCain, I thought he was running on experience. Right? You remember all that? Suddenly he's got, on his ads, he's got the change we need. He's starting to talk about turn the page. I guess imitation is the best form of flattery, but you know what? You know, I don't want him stealing my lines. I want him to steal some of my ideas. Change isn't just a slogan. Change is actually having some ideas to move the country forward. You know, it was 2 years ago that I introduced legislation to stop mortgage transactions that promoted fraud, risk, or abuse. It was 1 year ago that I called on the Treasury Secretary and our Fed Chairman to bring every stakeholder together and find a solution to the subprime mortgage meltdown before it got worse. It was in March, when John McCain was saying, "I'm always for less regulation," that I called for a new 21st century regulatory framework to restore accountability and transparency and trust in our financial markets. You know, the events of the past few days have made clear that we need to do more. We don't have time for commissions. We can't afford to lurch back and forth between positions, depending on the latest news of the day when dealing with an economic crisis, the way John McCain has. We can't be lurching around. We need some clear and steady leadership. And that's why I was ahead of the curve in calling for regulation, and that's why I'm calling on the Treasury and the Federal Reserve to use their emergency authorities to maintain the flow of credit, to support the availability of mortgages, and to ensure that our financial system is well capitalized. Tomorrow I'll be convening a meeting with my top economic advisors, former secretaries of the Treasury, former heads of the Federal Reserve Bank, to discuss a plan based on the ideas I've been talking about with former Fed Chairman Paul Volcker and other advisors of mine. And then I'll call for the passage of a Homeowner and Financial Support Act that would establish a more stable and permanent solution than the daily improvisations that have characterized policymaking over the last year. Now, specifically, here's what we need to do. 3 primary goals we need to accomplish. First, we will provide capital to the financial system. Second, we will provide liquidity to enable our financial markets to function. And third, we will do what I've been calling for since I supported legislation on it early last spring, which is to get serious about helping struggling families to restructure their mortgages on affordable terms so they can stay in their homes. We've made a good start, but we need to do much, much more. We cannot forget that there are many homeowners who are in crisis through no fault of their own. And a solution that does not have them at its core is no solution at all. Now, that's just in terms of dealing with the immediate financial crisis, but we've had a longer running crisis for a very long time before this latest problem on Wall Street. You know it in your own lives. Your wages and your incomes haven't gone up. Jobs have been shipped overseas. Millions of people across the country don't have health care. Young people can't afford to go to college. So we need to strengthen our economy overall from the bottom up to jumpstart this process, to get job creation going. I've proposed a $50 billion emergency economic plan that would save 1 million jobs by rebuilding our infrastructure, repairing our schools, helping our states, helping our local communities avoid damaging budget cuts. To help people stay in their homes, I'll change our bankruptcy laws. Because you know what, right now, if you have one house that you own and you get into financial trouble, a judge cannot modify your mortgage in bankruptcy. But get this, if you have 7 homes, then the judge can modify your 2nd home, your 3rd home, your 4th, your 5th, your 6th, and your 7th. Why is it that folks with 7 homes get more of a break than folks with 1? That doesn't make any sense, and we're going to change that when I get to Washington as President of the United States. The same is true on interest on your mortgage. You know, right now, if you've got a big house and you itemize your deductions, you get to take your interest off your taxes. But if you take a standard deduction because you just have a regular old house, then you don't. That's going to change. What I'm going to do is I'm going to offer a tax credit to struggling families that will take 10% off your mortgage interest rate, whether you are filing a standardized deduction or an itemized deduction. You're going to get a break. I'm going to institute a home score system that will help every consumer figure out whether they'll be able to make their mortgage payments before they buy their house. And I will crack down on predatory lenders who all too often have been targeting the Hispanic community with tough new penalties that will treat mortgage fraud like the crime that it is. But the most important thing I'll do as president is restore opportunity for all Americans. To get our economy growing, we need to recapture that fundamental American promise that if you work hard, you can pay your bills. If you get sick, you won't go bankrupt. That you can send your child to get a great education at a public school, and that you can go to college even if you're not wealthy, and that you can have a legacy of greater opportunity for future generations. That's the American promise. That's the change the American people need. And that's what I will provide when I'm President of the United States. You know, let me be even more specific. Change means a tax code that doesn't reward the lobbyists who wrote it, but the American workers and small businesses who deserve it. I'll stop giving tax breaks to corporations that ship jobs overseas. I'll start giving them to companies that create good jobs right here in America. I'll eliminate capital gains taxes for small businesses and startups. That's how we'll grow our economy and create the high-wage, high-tech jobs of the future. And listen, John McCain, he repeated this today. He's been putting it on commercials. Keeps on saying, oh, he's going to raise taxes. That's what's called an untruth. You know, when you don't have good ideas, I guess this is what you do. You know, Abraham Lincoln once said to one of his opponents, he said, if you stop telling lies about me, I'll start telling truth about you. So here's the truth. I will cut taxes for 95% of all working families. My opponent doesn't want you to know this, but under my plan, tax rates will actually be less than they were under Ronald Reagan. And if you make less than $250,000, if you make less than $250,000 a year, you will not see any of your taxes increase one single dime. In fact, I offer 3 times the tax relief for middle-class families as Senator McCain does. Because in an economy like this, the last thing we should do is raise taxes on the middle class. I will finally keep the promise of affordable, accessible health care for every single American. I know there's a critical issue all across America. Every group is suffering. Although some are suffering more, Hispanics, 1/3 of folks don't have health insurance, even though they're working. Single moms, I know about that. I was raised by a single mom. Don't have health insurance. Small business owners, they can't provide health insurance for themselves, much less their employees. So here's my plan. Under my plan, if you have health care, my plan will lower your premiums. But if you don't, you'll be able to get the same kind of coverage that members of Congress give themselves. And we are going to stop insurance companies from discriminating against those who are sick and need care the most. Insurance companies have to follow through on their promises, pay out their claims, stop excluding people for pre-existing conditions because it's the right thing to do. I'm going to create the jobs of the future, working with people like Governor Richardson. We're going to transform ourselves and create a new energy economy. Now, we can tap our natural gas reserves. It's possible for us to create clean coal technology. There's somebody here who is hollering about nuclear power. Look, but we need to invest in technology to see if we can store it properly. We may not be able to, but we need to, look, we've got to try everything. But I am going to help our auto companies. What we really have to do is to become more efficient and create renewable energy. I want to create the fuel-efficient cars of the future that are built right here in America. I want to make it easier for the American people to afford these new cars. And I am going to invest $15 billion a year over the next decade in affordable, renewable sources of energy, in wind power and solar power and the next generation of biofuels. We can put them here in northern New Mexico. We can help Indian country with economic development and energy independence. We can create millions of new jobs that pay well and can't ever be outsourced, but we've got to have leadership from Washington, and I intend to provide that leadership. And now is the time to finally meet our moral obligation to provide every child a world-class education. Because it will take nothing less to compete in the global economy. I refuse to accept that overcrowded, underfunded schools are the best we can do for our kids. I refuse to accept 4 in 10 Hispanic students dropping out of high school. I know we can do better than that. So I will recruit an army of new teachers, and I'm going to pay them higher salaries, and we are going to give them more support. I will ask for higher standards and more accountability, but we're going to change No Child Left Behind, so we're not just having teachers teach to the test. And we will keep a promise to every young American. If you commit to serving your community or your country, if you are joining our military, or you are working in a school on an Indian reservation, or you're working in a homeless shelter, or you join the Peace Corps, if you provide community service, and then in return, we will make sure that every single one of you can go to college. We will help you pay for it. You invest in America, we'll invest in you. And together, we're going to march this country forward. Si se puede. This is the change we need. The kind of bottom-up growth and innovation that will advance the American economy by advancing the dreams of individual Americans. We're going to take care of our veterans because we are going to end this war in Iraq. We are going to refocus attention where it should have stayed in Afghanistan and bin Laden and Al-Qaeda. And I will never hesitate to strike against those who would do us harm as Commander-in-Chief. But I promise you this, I will always have a clear mission. I will always send our troops into the battlefield with proper training and proper equipment, with a clear exit strategy, and I will make sure that they are always well served when they come home. No more homeless veterans, no more begging for disability payments. We will honor them and respect them the way they have served and honored and respected this country. Now, New Mexico, times are hard. I'm not going to pretend that the changes we need are going to come easy or that they're going to come without costs. You know, I have presented ways that we are going to be able to achieve these changes in a fiscally responsible way. I believe in paying your own way. I don't believe in leaving debt for your children and your grandchildren. We're going to have to pull together, and it's going to be hard. We may not be able to do everything all at once. But I know that we're going to have to work together to make it happen. We're going to have to overcome our doubts and our divisions. We're going to have to push back against determined opposition of powerful special interests before we can truly reform a broken economy and advance opportunity. But I'm running for president because we can't afford 4 more years of the same. We can't afford 4 more years of the same economic philosophy that has devastated Main Street and has seen pain trickling up to Wall Street. I don't want to wake up in 4 years to find that more Americans fell out of the middle class, more families lost their savings, more jobs were lost. I don't want to see a country that failed to invest in our ability to compete, that didn't give our children the kind of education they need, that mortgaged their future on a mountain of debt, that wasn't dealing with our environment, this precious land that God has given us. I don't want to wake up 4 years from now and find out that our financial markets are still in chaos and that our economy has slipped behind countries like China and India. I don't want that. I don't want that future for my children. I don't want that future for your children. And I don't want that future for America. This time, this election is our chance to stand up and say, enough is enough. And we can do this because as Americans, we have done this before. Time and again, we've battled back from adversity by recognizing that common stake that we have in each other's success. The idea that we're not on our own, the way George Bush and John McCain like to talk. We're in this thing together. Black, white, Hispanic, Asian, Native American, young, old, rich, poor, gay, straight. It doesn't matter. We are Americans, and we pull together. That's what binds us together as Americans. That's why our economy hasn't just been the world's greatest wealth generator. It's created jobs. It's made the dream of opportunity a reality for generation after generation of Americans. And now it falls on us. But New Mexico, I need you to make it happen. If you want the next 4 years looking just like the last 8, then I'm not your candidate. But if you want real change, if you want an economy that works for ordinary working people, for not just Wall Street, but also for Main Street, if you want tax relief for the middle class and millions of new jobs, if you want clean energy and health care you can afford and good schools for your kids, then I ask you to knock on some doors. Make some phone calls. Talk to your neighbors. To the Hispanic community, I want you to start actually voting your numbers. Start flexing your muscles. Right here in New Mexico, you'll be the difference maker. Don't stay home. Just remind yourself, si se puede. Si se puede. Yes, we can. If you will roll up your sleeves with me, if you will believe with me, then I promise you this. We will not just win New Mexico. We will win this general election. And then you and I together, we're going to change this country and we're going to change the world. God bless you. God bless you and God bless the United States of America. Thank you.